Getting the smile and confidence you've been dreaming about, all from the comfort of your home, isn't a total mystery with Bite clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all your friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Yutaka Tamanaha. He's one of the co-hosts behind the Horror Hour podcast, which is on podcast networks and YouTube. We hear he's also obsessed with his beard. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yes, it's very... Yeah, I am.
I mean, it's a very majestic beard.
I mean, I try. I mean, it used to be down to, like, half my stomach, so...
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah, I was
going for that take?
Living that full Fu Manchu fantasy.
Wow.
I want to say, like, maybe... It's been a couple times, so, like, maybe I think the last time was 3 years, but then I had to get carpal tunnel surgery, so they're like, you can't blow dry your beard or your hair. I was like, well, that's all gotta go.
Wow.
So we're starting fresh.
Are you going to let it keep growing down that length again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I'm a huge... It gives me something to do, like, when I'm nervous, or not nervous, but when I'm working and I'm trying to think, I'll just be sitting there petting my beard. It's terrible.
I get so itchy, and so I stop. I get to the point where, like, I hate it, and then just, like, zzz, and I start over from scratch, but... But this is not a beard podcast. Let's take it back to the very beginning. How did you get introduced to horror?
Well, let's see here. I was 6 years old.
Okay.
And I probably should not have been watching Alien. It was on the TV, and I still remember that moment because I was in the living room. My parents, who should have probably been watching me, were in the kitchen cooking chili and rice, and I just could not take my eyes off the screen. Now, granted, yeah, I had nightmares that night, but then ever since then, like, at a very young age, I loved being scared. I loved horror films. There are still others that, like, to this day, like, are traumatizing, but I just loved it. And even though I hated dressing up for Halloween, so that didn't make any sense. I just wanted the candy.
You didn't like dressing up for Halloween?
No, it's so much work.
Oh, but it was so... Okay. Where did you grow up? Oh, I gotta know.
St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay. Try being a Halloween fanatic in Alaska, where you have to put on snow pants, boots, a huge winter coat, on top of whatever costume you're wearing. Then tell me how much work it is, and I worked it.
I worked
Okay,
it.
fair enough. Okay.
Arctic Freddy Krueger fantasy.
Oh, yeah. I was
I'm
Freddy
loving
Krueger
that.
many years with my little plastic, like, almost foam type hat that they would sell in those kits, and those gloves where the knives would start to, like, bend to the side because they were made out of shitty plastic. Yes.
Oh my god, yeah. No, I dressed up as the Joker a lot because of Batman. And so all the white makeup, which but I hate glitter of all things, but all my parents could find was like a very glittery hat. So I had to it was a mess. Maybe that's why I didn't like dressing up, but
So, okay, Alien at 6. I saw Alien at 8, and that terrified me. So I can only imagine, 6 years old. Did that make you want to go seek out more horror films, or was that like, did you pull back?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think it was at that time where I just started to really just dive right in because in my neighborhood, like with all this group of kids, you know, everything was all about, oh, we want to stay up, we want to watch horror films, or just movies you shouldn't be watching. So, and most of the time it was horror films, so I just started to gravitate more towards those. Mm-hmm. Like, I think, gosh, right after Alien, probably maybe still I was 6 years old, I saw The Exorcist, which definitely shouldn't have seen. And then I started getting exposed to Halloween, Friday the 13th, which was never scary, but always really fun. And then eventually just became like this. I'd always go to the video store, look at the VHS covers and have to read the backs. You know, now we don't have that, but back then it was one of my favorite things to do.
Mine too. I mean, walking through the Blockbuster, the Hollywood Video, whatever, what have you, and looking at those covers, I think is something that a lot of people miss out on today. It was kind of made movies magical.
Oh my god, there's nothing better than this. You know, you love film when that's, you know, Friday night, new movies, you just want to go peruse the aisle or the new release wall, which then I eventually ended up working at Hollywood Video because of my love of just being able to, you know, be around that.
So we had someone on that also worked at Hollywood Video. I can't remember who it was, and I asked them the same question, but I gotta know, did your Hollywood Video make you wear tuxes?
No.
Or suits?
When I started working there, oh god, they had this awful blue denim shirt that we all had to wear. It was horrendous. And they're like, oh, but you gotta wear black slacks. I go, this is horrible. Who would do that? I'll go, what?
Wow. I just had to ask because, like, when Hollywood Video moved in, and I don't know, maybe they were trying to differentiate themselves from Blockbuster, but, like, everyone was wearing, like, basically up to the nines suit and like, I believe it was a bow tie from what I remember, like, just completely up to the nines. And I'm like, these people are not getting paid enough to be dressing in a fucking tux.
Absolutely not. Was anyone getting paid enough to dress like that?
The tux probably cost more than their salary.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because, I mean, I just look back and I think, I remember how much I made. I'll go, it wasn't worth it. Well, actually, okay, hold on. The free rentals, that's really where everything was worth it.
That's true. Yeah. That's very, very
And when
true.
you had physical screeners, well, I guess they still do those sometimes. But back then we would get those in. They're like, you can take these home. You can't sell it. You can't record it.
Okay.
So cool. So you watched Alien. You talked about The Exorcist. What were some other favorites of yours growing up in horror?
I mean, obviously, anything Nightmare on Elm Street, I grew up loving just because Freddy's so charismatic. I loved the Halloween series just because Michael was terrifying. But I really also just enjoyed a lot of those, like Night of the Demons.
Okay.
That is just so good. And I did enjoy some of the campier films, but I gravitated more towards gore growing up. It was just, and so I still miss how, really good practical effects because I feel like we've somewhat moved away from them. And I was arguing with somebody about how great Hellraiser was. Like, that's terrible. I go, for the 80s, that was beautiful.
Oh, it was stunning.
I still think it's stunning.
Oh, it is. But yeah, I'm a gore hound. I still will watch anything, but I just love seeing gore.
I did too. That as a kid, especially growing up in like the 80s, that is what I sought. Like the things that looked gnarly or goopy or gory. Like those were the things that definitely as a kid attracted me to it.
I will say, I love The Thing, but it's something I can only watch every few years, only because I own Huskies. And so it's just so hard to watch. Like, that's the one thing I'm like, oh, I can't watch that.
Okay.
But it's such a good film.
Can I tell you a dog story about The Thing really quick? This is like, so obviously The Thing is like one of my all-time favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I watched it with my stepdad and my now fiance a while ago, and watched it. Great, incredible time. 10 out of 10. Go upstairs to bed. Our dog Fern, who never follows me really to bed, jumps into bed with me and then just sits and stares directly at me. Like, not 10 minutes after the movie was over, this bitch followed me and sat on the bed and stared at me, and she never does that. And I was like, it's over. It's over. So I get it. I get it. Even though she wasn't a husky, I understood.
She's like, how dare you fucking watch that film? I love that. Ooh. Oh my gosh. I wish my husky would like do that, but she's just too busy she's a diva. So I'm like, okay, well, thanks.
I feel
What's
like
her
most
name?
huskies are.
Her name's Yuki. She is very, if it's not about her, she doesn't care. So everybody loves her at the kennel. I'm like, oh my God. But, I spoil her, so it's okay.
I love huskies. Even though I'm not really a dog person, I love huskies. They're so cute.
Their hair just gets everywhere. That's like, I was so glad when I was like, oh, we're on camera so we can see each other. But I was like, oh, thank God. Because I'm like, I got husky hair. And I was so excited to wear the shirt.
Yeah.
And, but I was just like, ugh.
He's wearing the Pride shirt from Mixtape and Me from this year. And I love it. It makes me happy.
Oh, it's so good.
Freddy does great designs, I just gotta say.
I loved the rated R for violence, or I woke up and chose violence. I was like, I'm going to buy a couple of those. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, so as an adult, I know that you said you kind of sought out like gory horror films. That sounds like it's still true today.
Oh, yeah.
So what are some that you've seen as an adult that you've really enjoyed?
Well, we went hard. Well, I really did, just because I will say as an adult, I would say you're very used to seeing, like, when I watch horror films, I feel like, oh, I might see that already the scare, or I might see, I can maybe predict what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. But VHS 94, just for some reason, watching the Hail Ratma sequence.
Hail Ratma!
Terrified the absolute shit out of me. And then the rest of and then of course Empty Wake and everything. And so I enjoyed that. I was like, man, maybe I want to start watching more, or films for me that just felt intense. And so like I just saw Resurrection, and oh my God, and Watcher. I'm just really looking for something that I can just kind of just surrender to and like really like get my blood pressure pumping. So I've been trying to gravitate towards more of that. Okay. I still would like to see more gore, but lately I really want to get that, I'm getting older, so let's test this heart.
Yeah, okay.
I love that.
Look, I mean, it's enjoyable when you're scared. I think that's supposed to give off like endorphins. I don't know, but
there you go.
I'll tell you what, I think what was the other one that it's still to this day, even as I would say The Descent is one that will still like, but when I watch it though, it's got to be in a dark room because I need to feel like I'm there. And if I really want to be stupid with myself, I'll watch it on the laptop and then lay down and put that on my chest. So it's like right there in my face. So I really get into it. That's just a bad idea, but it's fun.
Okay, so because you said that you're now looking for things that are going to make your heart stop. What is the last movie? You maybe have answered it with VHS 94, but what is the last movie that like really terrorized you?
Okay, so this one terrorized me on a different level versus. I remember I watched it at Sundance, and it was Master, and that was a different type of horror to me and terror. And I remember just not knowing about it, but I was like, okay, it sounds interesting. Everybody's talking about it. And as soon as I start watching, it took me back to where I felt like I was back in college. And as soon as I saw like those microaggressions and everything else, I was like, oh my God. Like it really, it just shook me. Like after we finished watching it, I was like, I sat by myself for like maybe 15 minutes. I was like, I need to get my shit together because that wrecked me. And I'm like,
oh wow.
Damn. I was like, I just like true story is when I was in college, and at the time I thought it was funny, even though I should have recognized, like, that's not cool. But, like, my nickname was Jaundice, because I was technically yellow, in a sense, like, being Asian, and I didn't, like, realize how I was like, oh, that's kind of offensive. I probably shouldn't have been okay with that. But back then in school, you want to be liked, you're in college, you're fresh, you know, you're around, you want to be accepted, and so I was like, I accepted those things, and so watching that movie just made me remember all this stuff. I was like, damn. I was like, that hit on another level that I wasn't expecting. I was like, well, I was going to watch more horror films tonight, but I was like, I think I'm done for the night.
I mean, understandable.
Yeah, I was just like, I was like, well, okay.
Wow.
I was so excited to get to watch something at Sundance, but I was like, all right.
Wow.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that mood down, but
no,
it was such an effective film that I just, like, I was so impressed because I wasn't expecting to be scared in that sense. But yeah, it just brought back so much. I was like, kudos to the writer and director. I was like, that. Yeah. I was like, I really enjoyed it. And I was also like, well, I'm glad I'm not friends with those people anymore.
Yeah, me too. Jesus.
Oh.
What would you consider to be your favorite horror movie as an adult? As
an adult?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, shit. That puts me on the spot. You know what? When I think of something that I really enjoy, it's something that has this, like, high rewatch factor. I could maybe fall asleep to it, or, maybe there are actually two.
Okay.
Because one got me through the pandemic. So I'm going to go with You're Next, because there's very few horror films that take place in Missouri. So I'm all about that. So, like, sure. And yeah, I love that film just because Aaron's just a badass, and we need more of that. And what was the line? She's like, no, you can't go in the basement because then they'll just pour gasoline to light a match. And you're like, who is this bitch? Okay.
What I love about that movie is how it changes genre when you watch it again. Like, the first time you watch it, you're like, think this is like a scary home invasion movie. And then you watch it again, it's like a dark comedy. And then you watch it again, and it's like, these motherfuckers are inept as fuck. And it becomes like a dumb home invasion comedy. Like, every time I watch it, I am struck by something completely different. A different tone.
I love it. And then the other one, just like I said, it got me through the pandemic. And I guess it's a TV movie, but it was part of the Blumhouse Into the Dark series. And it was the one, My Valentine. Just because of the mental health themes, but also the soundtrack is such a banger that I can listen to it on repeat. And so it just hits all the right notes for me. So
which one was that? I'm trying to think.
What was it?
I've seen a lot of them.
She's the two, I guess, pop stars. Well, there's Treasure, and then there's the real Valentine. And then it's just about her previous past toxic relationship, but also her taking back her identity, finally going out again, performing live. And I just loved that vibe. But also when it got into, like, the mental health themes, which I know we'll talk about, I'm very passionate about mental health. So I really I will say, regardless, even at a young age or even now as an adult, I gravitate towards those films when they either put it in a good light or at least give it where it doesn't come off as
exploitive.
Yes, thank you. So I really gravitate towards those a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask about your podcast.
Me too.
And can you hear a little bit more about your podcast?
Well, it's changed over the course of that. We've been around for a little over a year, and that I think we lucked out because, again, we do reviews, which I feel that I'm skeptical because I get nervous having other people be like, that's a shit review. I'm like, oh man. But we do interviews and I really enjoy that. And then the other thing is we do just like to argue with each other. And so we get real, like, gutted and rotted. And the thing is, none of us have ever met. We're from all over. Yeah.
Yeah, you have people across the sea, right? Like
we connected during COVID. We all followed a certain YouTuber who is problematic, so we'll leave that person out. But so we all watched them, and so we ended up just forming like a group chat, and then suddenly a couple of them, we have our little chat that says horror homos, and like, hey, do you just want to form a podcast that go and talk about horror? Sure. And then I'm like, oh, let's think of names. And I'm like, well, you can't do that because that's used. It's like, you can't do that. That's used. So it's like, well, we'll just go with whatever. But yeah, there are 2 in the UK, 1 in Ireland, 2 in New York. And then we just had people from all over. And then I think people started to notice this, I think, during Dragula coverage, because I love drag. And we've got 2 things, horror and drag, like, sign me the fuck up. Like, and then, yeah, we just started kind of going the more of the arguing route, because what you'll learn is we're all of different age. So the younger ones think horror might have started after, like, the 2000s. I'm like, no, there's a lot of great shit you're missing out on. Like, we just had George finally watch Slumber Party Massacre.
I mean, okay, to be fair, I only watched it last year when the remake came out.
What?
Yeah. I haven't seen the sequel, which I hear is great.
Oh my god, there's such a good gross out scene in the sequel too. If you don't like pus, maybe skip that one. But it's one of my favorite scenes. And it's got the girl from if you remember the sitcom Wings. But yeah, I love a lot of, like, I grew up on 70s and 80s horror. I really, I love 90s horror and even horror nowadays, but I chuckle because, yeah, we're all I think George's favorite movie of all time is Paranormal Activity. I'm like, well, that's great. I guess that's not for me, but okay. Well, yeah. So I love it. That's really what it is. And it's a good time. We're all a mess. That's probably, it's a great outlet.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's on, you have it on YouTube. Is it the same? Is it on YouTube and then you also have the audio on podcast? Is that how?
Yes. So we film everything for YouTube but we put it on Spotify and Apple. And I will say, just putting anything out there on social media is so nerve-wracking. Yeah. So when I listen to other podcasts or I see people like put themselves out there, I'm like, how do you all do it? So I even still, like, to this day, I'm like, I second guess things. And I, like,
we do too.
Going to my first film festival as press was very nerve-wracking. And people were like, you just need to go up to other people and talk. I go, I don't know what to say. Like,
I'm too introverted to do that.
And thank God, like, this movie theater had a bar in it, and I looked over, and somebody had an artist pass, and I quickly read their name, like, oh shit, I love their movie, and I'm actually about to go see it. I can easily do something here. And, like, struck up a conversation. I was like, oh, okay, well, there was my one big task for the day. I feel accomplished now. So, yeah, it's fun, but I would say out of even all that, I think my favorite things are when we do get to interview filmmakers, just because I think it's a world that I've never got to be a part of, and it's just nice to be able to just sit and chill.
What's been your favorite interview?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what we do here.
I would have to say, oh, damn. Okay. Oh, it's tied. I'm going to pull that.
Okay.
So we did get to do a panel with My Valentine. I will be honest, everything's happened via DMs sometimes. But we had the writer-director, we had Britt Barron, and then we had the composers of the soundtrack come on, and we just talked about the film, and we had a roundtable discussion.
Oh, wow.
And so that is very meaningful just because it happened right, I mean, gosh, I'm trying to think if lockdown, if we're still in that, but it was also the first time they all had been able to see each other, even if just via Zoom. So it was really cool.
Oh, wow.
And then the other one, I would have to say, because it's a fellow Japanese, individual. And so I just kind of, growing up, I never really, it would have to be, I'm sorry, I take that back, even though that's one, but it would have to be actually the cast of They, Them, even though that's a very polarizing movie right now.
It really is.
But I will say, in my almost 39 years, I have never been able to see myself represented on screen. And so to see a queer Asian American portray that is something that I like. That just, it warmed my heart. And I probably almost cried during the interview as I was, speaking with them. So that I would say those two.
That's fantastic.
I do love them all. Even the one with Christina Elise and, I can't remember his name. They're going to kill me, from Chucky too. Alex Vincent, because she said the C word like 37 times, and that was a good moment.
Wow.
It's a term of endearment overseas, but I was like, Ben, you cannot say that word. And she let it slip. And I was like, oh my God, I told Ben he couldn't say that. And she's like, what? And just rants it off. And I'm like, it's like, this will be an interesting experience. It was. It's a lot of fun. I think that's
amazing. Well, okay, Yutaka, we've talked about your horror history and your podcast, but what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
It's a good one.
I brought Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors.
Woo! All right, let me read a brief synopsis, and then we're going to
insert
right
Dokken music here.
Oh, yes. Oh my God, that music video.
A psychiatrist familiar with knife-wielding dream demon Freddy Krueger helps teens at a mental hospital battle the killer who is invading their dreams.
Thanks, IMDb.
Thanks, IMDb.
I swear, sometimes their synopsis are just like, they make me laugh. They're just, who wrote them? Who phrased it that way? With a psychiatrist familiar with knife-wielding dream demon Freddy Krueger. Like, who wrote that?
Somebody who's not watched the film.
Well, and also doesn't want to spoil it. Oh, there's a spoiler. It's Nancy, the psychiatrist. Like, anyway.
That's the big thing. I'd be like, Nancy returns. Like, what?
Yeah. Anyway, IMDb aside, take us back to the very beginning. How did you see this movie? When did you see it? Why is this your Scarred for Life choice? Give us your horror story.
Okay, so I know, it was before the 90s, so I was probably, I think I was around 7 years old. See, watched this stuff when I was young. And at the, it's funny because I saw this before I saw the original Nightmare on Elm Street, so I didn't know the Freddy lore or anything, let alone that I'm now watching a film where this man attacks you in your dreams. There's nothing you can do about it, especially when as you see through the course of the film with some of the characters. I'm like, well, I can't fucking go to sleep after this. He's gonna come get me. This is terrible. And then on top of that, as I'm watching this, if there's one thing that really terrifies me in life, it's not that I'm claustrophobic, but it's still being in a place to where you can still move, walk around, but you're still blocked in. If technically during the pandemic, we really couldn't leave our houses in a sense at times. And so that and so seeing all of these kids within, a mental institute, at a psychiatric facility, and the fact that, they're behind these locked doors, they can't get out. Meanwhile, now one thing that they can't even run or do anything. And now you've just got nothing but your dreams. Like when they put Kincaid in the quiet room, I was just like, nope, not having this. Don't want this. I can't. And then, something that even creeped me out because I was still not like, I love Alien, but when Freddy comes up out of the ground and swallows her, even though now I watch it as an adult, I'm like, this is slightly sexual, but okay. At the time as a kid, I didn't get that context, I guess. But I was like, oh my god, oh my god, great. He's gonna attack me in my dreams. I don't know what he's going to do. He's clearly gonna, there was just so much in that film that terrified me and just was like an assault on my senses, because then you also kind of have the comedy, so it feels like it's luring you in to like this, okay, this is a safe film. And then, nope, he smashes your head into a television. I was like, well, shit.
Welcome to prime time, bitch. Iconic line.
It is. And honestly, it's funny because as I watch this, and this film freaked me out so much as a kid, I didn't realize, how much of a drastic change it was from the original, in a sense. And so then when I saw that, I go, well, this is a whole nother film. What? But, I mean, Freddy's Freddy. He's so charismatic that, man, there's a lot about his character that I love. But that third one, just, the other thing, when you're a kid or a teenager and you are struggling clearly with something and none of the adults gave two shits or even cared to listen, granted, yes, it's fantastical in the sense of what's happening, but it's just like, me as a kid, I'm like, well, shit, I'm thinking, well, if this does happen, they're not going to believe me, or I'll get that you shouldn't have been watching that. So it's like, well...
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that these films, particularly like the first, I would say 4, do really well, is pit the kids against the parents in a way that it's like you realize that the people that are supposed to protect you, whether that's your parents, whether that's the psychiatric facility that you're at trying to get help at, regardless of what it's going to be, teachers, it doesn't matter. These people are going to fail you. Cops, even. I mean, even in the first one and in this one to some degree. Cops, everyone is going to fail you, and you are on your own because no one's going to believe you. It's the kind of the message of this film, of these films.
Yeah, and so even even at the end, I still felt somewhat helpless because I was just like, well, I looked at it, I was like, some of you survived. But at what cost? I mean, you're still going to be messed up with the fact of you can't... Sure, you may have defeated the demon, but I looked at it, I was like, you are going to have so much sleep deprivation. There was just... And so for me as a kid, I'm like I had nightmares, which is funny because now as an adult, I love them. Don't ask. But as a kid, obviously, I'm like, what are you going to do? So... I
mean, you brought up the... that they're going to be kind of fucked by the end of the movie, regardless of if they survive or not. And I think that's something this movie does incredibly well, because at this point, Nancy is broken. She's having to take these Hypnosil so that she has dreamless sleep. She's becoming a psychiatrist to try to understand this kind of stuff and help other people deal with it, because she knows that Freddy's still there. Her father has picked up where her mother left off when she died and is like drinking himself into oblivion, trying to forget and cover up the guilt of what happened. All these teens are, before they even get into the movie starts, they are pretty much, they're broken. They're trying to pick up the pieces and fix themselves. By the end of this movie, they're going to escape Freddy. And we know that none of them actually do escape Freddy in the sequel.
It's very true.
But even if that weren't to happen and this was the end of that story for them, they're still just going to be as broken as Nancy and her father were from the first movie.
Mm-hmm. And, oh my God, Kristen's mom. Can we talk about a piece of work?
Andale. Oh. Kudos to her for teaching me a Spanish word when I was 8 years old, but fuck you, lady.
Oh my, and her voice was so grating, and it the lack of, when she's sitting there, she's telling them, telling the staff her daughter's issues and just blowing everything off. I'm like, who? What? You technically walked in on your daughter and she's got a razor blade and she's technically, in a sense, looks like she slit her wrist. I'm like, and you are just, you don't care. What? Mm-mm.
But I also with the introduction of Kristen, you feel like she's set up as the final girl, and she is to an extent. You have now well-known actress playing Kristen, whose name I just fucking forgot. What the hell?
Patricia Arquette.
Patricia Arquette.
What the hell? Patricia Arquette is playing her. And so, you know, she's set up as this main character, similar to Nancy, but then it becomes a group movie. And it's so much more about kids coming together rather than the journey of one individual. Which, I remember I was doing some research about this when we were talking, and Wes Craven actually wanted to make sure that, like, to transition us into not just a single person fighting back against Freddy, but a whole group, because Freddy has gotten more powerful, which was really interesting. It's, like, really interesting to read about the idea for this, but it also makes it so much more interesting. I feel like we just get so much more into these characters' heads, and there's more depth to the characters. They're not as tropey, I think, as we see. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. I love Nancy. This is not knocking that movie whatsoever, but this one evolves a lot into doing something new, which is what, I mean, Craven is so good at doing that and taking a story and, like, moving it into a new form that's recognizable, but also stands alone, or, like, is unique in a way. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love this movie so much, and it's also so fucking heartbreaking, because you get to know these characters much better, as much as you can, and get into their heads and really understand where they're coming from as, like, you know, hurting kids, hurting young adults who are just trying to grow up, and it's just so much more tragic, I guess.
You know, and why can I not? Oh, there. Okay, so Taryn, let's talk about the fact that this film also, you know, brings in addiction, and the way she's killed is just so, like, I still see that. I'm like, it's so gut wrenching.
The needle marks that are sucking and trying to, like, get the needle is just so upsetting.
It's so fucked up.
Like, I remember, like, what the like, it's interesting because I still, like, I just rewatched this a couple times this week, actually, because I really enjoy this film. And even though I know these certain characters are going to die, it still, like, breaks my heart because I never want that. This, you know, there are certain slashers, and I have to say this was one of them where I just hated seeing the characters go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as a kid, like, that, you know, I didn't realize who Nancy was at the time when I first watched this, but now it's definitely, it hits every time, because I'm like, I don't want Nancy to go.
Right. With Taryn, though, I think the needle marks on her arms is such a perfect visual representation for addiction, because it's like you don't have it, you're trying to abstain from it, you're trying to get away from it, but there's still that feeling of need in your body. And the way that those things are like, yes, give it to me, is just, it's so upsetting, but it's also, I think, a fantastic visual metaphor for the I think, inner struggle that she's probably going through her entire life, potentially. Well, I mean, she dies, unfortunately, but...
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, and there's that, you know, she's trying to just make it through while she's in there, and even that one orderly is like, hey, I've got the good stuff, and she's like, I'm just trying to... I'm like, there's just so many things as I'm older, I'm like, wow, they really hit the nail on the head with some of this stuff, because also, you know, if you think about back then, too, like, those facilities were not the best, just in terms of, with staff and how, you know, individuals were cared for. And so I just find it very fascinating to watch back then and, you know, just think about it. And so my first thought as a kid watching this is like, where are they? I'm thinking it's a hospital. They should be helping these, you know, these kids, you know, and I'm just like, what? And again, it goes back to everybody in their life failing them except, you know, their peers.
Well, and I will say, like, I have had friends who have spent time in facilities like this even recently, and this experience isn't that far off from what people still experience in these places now either. Like, yeah, their 80s are known for, you know, not having the best treatment, but people are still treated like absolute shit in these facilities too. So I watched this for the first time the summer of 2020. I watched all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies for the first time. I saw the first one, but I went through the whole series for the first time. And I watched this one, and I like the second one, but it's obviously very silly. And then this one kind of, like, took me by surprise because it's so much more, I think, emotionally intense in terms of how it looks at the issues that kids and young people go through, and what these inner fights look like, and how no one has resources to really, like, they're not given the resources because they're not taken seriously as kids and as young people, and mental illness is not taken seriously, and it's just like, Jesus Christ. And then going off of that with Nancy, who, and this is the thing, was a movie I was like, I'm so glad I've seen this, because people are always like thinking like, oh, there's finally final girls like getting their revenge as they're older now, and a portrayal of final girl trauma, but we've had it the whole time in like movies like this. And like how fucking hard it is to get better. I mean, obviously it's about Freddy, but it just reminds me of how you grew up with a mental illness and learn how to just live with it rather than like being able to fully defeat it.
Or in, Nancy's case, had to be medicated with, a drug that technically was very still experimental in the film, And so I've, myself have spent time, at a facility, at a hospital within their ward. And, growing up, I would say, I was a teenager at the time, and, it's very interesting because, yes, I would certainly say this has some, it feels real. I would like to think now things have progressed, even though we do hear horror stories. And so I look back because I'm like, wow, that's still, as the tone or as it was representing, these kids in that scenario, I was like, that feels very authentic and real, even though we still have this demon, this creature, in a sense, which is not real. But I really just, there's something that Wes really did with this film that it just really sits, it freaked me out as a kid, but now as an adult, it just really sits there with me, because it's one of the reasons why I love Wes Craven. But it's definitely just a film that I feel just has really just sat with me throughout my life. So you said that you saw this before you saw the first one, and I think that's interesting, because I do think I grew up, I saw this one in the 80s. When did it come out? It was 87.
Yeah. So
I did not see this one. So I saw the very first one when I was young. But in the 80s, you watch what you can get your hands on. And so I went from watching this movie to watching the fourth movie. Okay. And the fourth movie remains to be my favorite of the sequels to this day for a multitude of reasons. But I watched the fourth one, didn't realize that it was like a direct sequel to 3. And so then when I finally watched 3, I was so confused. Because first of all, Tuesday night is Kristen in my young mind, because she plays Kristen in 4. And so then I see this one, and it's Patricia Arquette, and I'm like, who are you? I know your mom, because she says "andale, andale" in the fourth one a whole lot. So I know. God. So I know that that's your mom, but who are you? Because you are not Kristen. And so it was like this really weird experience of watching the fourth one and then watching and not realizing that it was, again, a direct sequel to this, and then finally watching this one. And I have some very specific memories of seeing this as a kid. I remember trying to self-hypnotize myself in those hypnosis scenes. Never being able to, but like, okay, I'm going to stare at it this time. This time I'm going to get hypnotized. Never was able to.
I love that.
I remember trying the spoonful of instant coffee with the soda. Can confirm it tastes like shit.
Oh. I kind of want to try that, but no, I'm good.
It was not good. Yeah, I remember that in particular. Gross. Like, it's just like, your face, like, just like, it's so bitter that it just closes up, and it was not good. But I tried it because my girl, Kristen, was doing it, and I was like, ooh, I gotta do this. This is okay. So I'm curious what your guys' favorites are, and maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. But this is not my favorite of the movies.
No,
it's not.
Well, you're wrong.
That's heartbreaking.
That's not since this isn't a good movie. I like every single Nightmare on Elm Street movie, even 5, which I think is abysmal as hell.
We're not counting the remake, right?
Oh. That
Okay,
is
just
word we
making sure.
do not say in this house. There is no remake.
Absolutely.
Stinky, stinky.
Okay.
But this is I think 4 is a much better movie.
Hmm.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm
I
in the minority.
don't know about all that.
I will say, I won't agree to that, but I will say Alice was a badass character. Alice,
My favorite
was-
final girl.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, Alice, like, that's what sells for and is able to keep me entertained in 5 is Alice.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
She's the best final girl.
Jeez.
I'm sorry. She is.
I won't agree to that one, but
I know,
she's
not
up
many
there for
people
me.
will, but she is my favorite. She is my favorite.
She's definitely up there, just because I really enjoyed the progression we just saw of her character.
Yes. Well, this is not a Dream Master podcast episode,
I know.
but I will say that I do think 4 is a queer episode, a queer movie in it.
A queer episode?
A queer movie in the franchise.
Okay.
And I love that she goes from being this like mousy character to being an absolute badass who's in control of her sexuality and her identity by the end of the film.
Oh, I like that. It's still not going to make me like it over 3, but I like that.
Because she goes through and she takes all of the best things about every gender, all of her friends, and she explores gender through all of her friends and and her brother and everyone that gives her powers, and she becomes a full-fledged person by the end of the movie. So I think 4 is a superior movie in that regard. But moving on, one thing that I did do as a kid, I played the video game. I don't know if you guys ever knew there was a video game.
On NES?
Yes.
I did not know there was a video game.
Oh my
There
God,
was a
I love
Nightmare on
it.
Elm Street video game on NES, and it's basically kind of takes from this story. You have the waking world, and then if you fall asleep in the waking world, you take on some of the powers of some of the characters in this. My favorite, ironically for me, because I don't like his, I think, well, okay, we'll get to that. I'm not a huge fan of Will's dream character, but he was my favorite to play in the game because he could shoot fireballs and stuff and stay away from enemies.
Oh my gosh, I haven't played that game in like obviously ages, but
I watched a YouTube playthrough of it, and I was like, "Oh my god, this brings me so much back. This brings me so back to it." Because the idea is you have to go find the bones of Freddy and put them together and finally vanquish him. So it's basically the plot of this movie. But
pretty much. I'm trying to think when this came out now, but you know, I remember when the video game came out, and it's still like. Actually, I just remember growing up and like still, you know, watching these movies and you shouldn't be. And then you see these video games because there's also the Friday the 13th video game. And it's just like, really?
Yeah.
Like, and now you see games like that and it'd be like, oh, rated M. I'm like, we were playing it all on the NES back in the day.
Yeah, we were stalking Jason and trying to like stay away from him from in the houses, and we were fighting Freddy with fireballs.
I love it. Oh, that warms my nerd heart. It just like takes me back.
So one of the reasons that I don't think this movie is as superior as a lot of people do, I say that, and this is probably like my third favorite movie of the franchise, but I don't think it's 1, 4, and then 3. It just is. That's the way it's going to be for me, for this boy.
Okay.
What I think this movie does incredibly well, and I realized I was trying to think why this movie never really connected with me as much as it did with a lot of people who consider it either the best or the second best Nightmare on Elm Street movie in the franchise, is that it does a very fantastic job of creating all this trauma and being very grounded and presenting these fantastic characters that are grappling with a whole lot of shit. It's when it goes into the dream world, particularly in the final act, that everyone is becoming like fantastical, that I think it kind of steps away from being this really interesting mediation on mental health and all that, and trauma and teens versus adults and that kind of stuff, and gets a little campy. And it's that change that it never sit with me, because at least 4 is what you see in the beginning is what you're going to get by the end of the movie. And yes, it probably is not as thematically interesting as this film is, but by the time this movie goes from being very, we're talking real life and death situations, the nurse coming in trying to sedate people, the screaming, the fighting, the people that are dealing with thoughts of suicide, the people that are, all the deaths are ruled as suicide. Like, it is very human, grounded, authentic type stuff that we're dealing with. And by the time we get to the finale, it's just like, we have a wizard shooting lightning bolts. I'm sorry. It's, as much as he's my favorite character, and as much as that probably would be my special
your
power.
Favorite character?
No, he's my least favorite character.
Oh, okay.
No,
that's
least
right.
favorite
You did
character.
say that. Okay.
Least favorite. No. Although I will say that if I were to, I was thinking, and I'm curious what your guys' entries are, but like, if I had to have a dream power, I would probably turn into a wizard, because that is what I fantasized about as a kid. However, I do think that becomes incredibly campy, and it kind of takes away, from me, everything that was built up to that moment.
Okay, well, I'm going to counter some of that, because think about, one of my favorite things that I did, that I loved about this is, in the dream world, the fact that we can be whatever we want to be. Our dreams are somewhat camp, though, at times. Like, vibrant colors, things that shouldn't exist. And so I will say yes, because the whole, me, when he's like, I'm the wizard master, I'm like, oh my God, D&D, a man after my own heart. I mean, even though, yeah, he's probably the worst. But there's something about that I enjoyed, because part of, when you're going up against Freddy is you want to be the best that you can be. And in their mind, this is that. And so I kind of actually, even though I think his death, kind of that whole wheelchair thing, that was interesting, which I get, yes. But the design looked hokey, I guess. But I don't know. I loved that camp. What I hated, that damn skeleton. Why is that skeleton? No. That doctor and that skeleton, I was like, I'm not of this. Absolutely not.
See, that worked for you because it's Harryhausen. Like, it's like stop motion. I was like, this is Jason and the Argonauts. This is, Clash of the Titans. So for me, that part really worked. The thing I'll say about Will is that his cape, it reminds me, I don't know, I always go to 30 Rock. There's a character in 30 Rock who is Liz Lemon's lawyer, and he's like this he looks like a young kid. He looks like he's barely out of high school, and he's her lawyer. But he wears like this suit that is like 10 times too big for him, so it just sort of hangs on him, and it makes him look even more childish. When he goes into the magical, the dream world, and he wears that cape, I'm like, couldn't they have found a cape that actually fits him? Because it's just like dwarfing him, and he's just like, I'm a magician, but my cape is like 20 times my size.
It's funny because now I can think of so many different anime references where like they have capes like that, and so that's why I'm like, that's not really out of the realm. But what's gonna probably like get some. I've not watched really 30 Rock, so I know the characters, but I don't know that lawyer. So now I'm like, I'm gonna have to look this up.
Just Google 30 Rock and then Simon. What is his name? Simon Barrons, Barrons. Google him
to check that
and
out.
You'll see him. Yeah. So Mary Beth, you saw this what, 2 years ago for the first time?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Well, and I talked about this a million times before, but like, I was not a franchise girly. I didn't think it was necessary to watch the other movies and franchises. Like, I kind of grew up with a parent who was like, it's not worth seeing any of the other, like any of the franchise like entries. Just stick with the original ones. And so I hadn't seen a lot of. I've seen I had seen the OGs, but I hadn't seen all of them because I was kind of just like under the impression that the third, fourth, fifth movies are terrible. And while sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And sometimes they're really fun. And so I bought all of them on DVD and marathoned them. I think it was the height of pandemic summer where there was nothing to do but catch up with. That was also the year that for my birthday I watched all of the Paranormal Activity movies and got really high all day, and that was my birthday that year. So yeah, that was what the pandemic was for me. A lot of catching up on franchises and smoking a lot of weed. I'm glad for it. Had a great time.
But Paranormal Activity?
Oh, I love Paranormal Activity.
I do too, but I don't know if I could marathon that. That's dedication.
Oh yeah, I wasn't fucking around. That was my birthday. I was like, I can't do anything fun for my birthday, so I'm just gonna watch. This is my fun, and it was great.
I just saw actually Paranormal Activity. I just have now seen this series just as of recent, as of last year.
We have an audio commentary, not to plug ourselves, on the original. It's over there somewhere. My head. I am terrible at maneuvering a camera. But we have an audio commentary on one of the Blu-rays. We love Paranormal Activity around here. The first one for me. The rest of them,
I wish I would have saw the first one in theaters. I really
That's the experience.
wish I would have. And I am still kicking myself because after I watched it, I was like, oh, okay. Yep, now I see why people love this. I was like, man, to have been in the theater and have watched this, I was like, damn.
That's a perfect movie-going experience in the theater. But Mary Beth, I am curious, because like in our notes, you did say that your jaw dropped watching this one multiple times. At what moments are like the big ones that like really got you?
Well, number one is vain ventriloquist boy or vain puppet boy.
Oh God. What heartbreaking.
All of them washing
That
and pounding
was
on the
clever.
window, like them all pounding on the windows and like trying to get help and nothing happens and you're just watching it happen and it's just like the most helpless moment of them wanting to help their friend who is like enduring this horrendous death. And I was like, good Lord. Like the first movie is obviously intense, but this one like takes creative kills to another level in terms of just cruelty to young people. I mean, like the veins and then the needles were the two that like really stood out. And also the TV and slamming her head into the TV, like while it's kind of comedic in a way, it's also just like so violent and so you're not like, they don't let you look away and the practical effects are incredible and it's just jaw dropping in the cruelty and the creativity of it all, I think. And it's just how well it stands up. I mean, it's from 1987, but it still is just like, oh my God. Like, that's the most upsetting thing I've ever seen.
Oh, that little, like, Freddy puppet doll, like, with the claymation and like,
yes. Oh my, yes.
I want to own one of those.
Me too. But I do think Philip's death is probably the most horrific of the series in terms of, like, how graphic, gory, and mean it is.
Yeah, that is brutal.
Because, I mean, there's some really gross deaths. I'm thinking, like, in 4 with the bug death and all of that. Like, there are some gnarly moments, but, like, Philip's death is the most horrifying.
I mean, with the themes and just how, like, even when they show the veins, too.
Yeah.
It's the one where we see his foot. And it's, like, out of it. And it's almost like you almost just want to, like, can you just pull it a little bit further and get it out? Because it's, like, right there. And it's so... And his face, that smile when he gets out of the bed and he has, like, this horrific smile just plastered on his face. But I'm sorry, Mary Beth, I interrupted you.
I was going to say, like, because of, like, they're in a psychiatric hospital and you have this, like, self-harm imagery going on with this whole, like, with that. And with the needle death as well. There's a lot of, like, self-harm imagery here that it's, one, really easy for you to just say, oh, they killed themselves, like, they're just crazy kids, and it's very easy to you know, push it off. And then it's just, and then two, it's just, you know, you're getting that imagery over and over again, especially if, like, you yourself have had mental health issues. And also in terms of, I have OCD, and this has a lot of, like, it kind of made me think about intrusive thoughts of physical harm, and, like, how Freddy is the manifestation of them, like, coming to life. And you're like, fuck, these are just supposed to exist in my brain, but they're actually happening. And it's just, like, incredibly... That was something I wasn't expecting to really, like, confront, like, intrusive thoughts watching this movie. And I thought about it more the second time I watched it and how it really kind of hits that, like, personal scare point for me as well.
Well, and it's also I'm trying to think. I think it's the first one, because I don't think 1 or 2 did this, where Freddy kind of turns your joys against yourself, or like things against you, because
right.
and that, again, that's a good visual representation of depression, where the things that, you know, bring you joy, like making the puppets and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a little iffy when it comes to Tyrion's situation, but like the idea that these things he uses against you and ultimately kills you with, like, you know, the wheelchair for Will being like his way to get around, and it's what slashes him and turns against him. It's the puppetry. It's Joey's horniness.
Joey.
Okay, what happened to his little teardrop tattoo that was in one scene when he's introduced and then is no longer there?
I felt like it was like maybe marker. I don't know. I can't really defend that too much.
I never really noticed it before, but I was on this watch and I was like, first of all, I was like, oh, he has a teardrop tattoo or something, and then it's gone and it's never addressed. It's never brought up. And I was like, what happened to that?
Huh.
I am now going to have to rewatch it.
Well,
but
didn't think
Joey,
about that.
What a lovable goof. I love Joey. I love him even more in the sequel, even though he's not in it very much. But him and his horn dog ways, he's just trying to get with that hot nurse.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
And Freddy catfishes him.
Oh, yes.
Freddy's a big catfish.
It's true.
We gotta talk about Amanda Kruger and how this movie gives a backstory for Freddy that is interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Amanda Kruger gets stuck in a criminally insane institution for a weekend and is raped hundreds of times.
Yep.
And Freddy is the quote-unquote bastard son of 1,000 maniacs.
Yep.
That's a choice.
Fine. I think that's fine. I don't really know what you're talking about. I think it sounds cool. Totally
Yeah, I don't know if that backstory was needed. It was
a choice.
Yeah,
But it's also like
that doesn't hold up.
It's just like one of those things that I think that frustrates me with movies like this. And like, I think not even movies, like franchises, where it's like you have to have the most horrendous thing happen to the mother, and that's what makes the kid evil. So somehow the blame becomes on the mom, or like her trauma is what causes this kid to be this way. And it's always like the mom's fucking fault, even though like here, obviously, you know, she was raped and it wasn't her fault. But there's still that weird, like there still is like an air of blame put on her of being put in that situation and like her kid turning out that way. And it's just always like, but why does women's trauma have to be the spawn of all this shit? Like, that's just always a frustrating thing in horror to me, where it's like, the woman goes through trauma and makes a monster. And it's like, well, I guess.
It was something else. I can't say that was my favorite part in the film.
At least it's not 5 where we get like a sort of recreation of that event.
Oh my god.
That was a bad idea. That was a choice. Oh.
Wasn't there like a baby Freddy in that one too? Am I remembering that?
Alice's baby was going to become the rebirth of Freddy, and the baby was having nightmares, and that's...
First off, why didn't she get the fuck out of town? I'm just saying, why would you?
Girl.
Don't get me wrong, Dan was hot, but...
Oh,
you
Dan?
two could, like, get the fuck out. Like, bye.
Dan and Alice's brother, whose name is escaping me for a moment, those were, like, the two epitomes of sexuality for me as a kid growing up. It's like, preppy boy Dan... Culturally, I like looking back on it now, it's a little cringy. Culturally appropriating brother, but he's a punk, and he's like, you know, it's like those two, like, he's a badass with spiky hair and Christian Slater wannabe, and then Dan, preppy boy.
I don't have them anymore, but I remember when they came out with a Nightmare on Elm Street comic series, and it was just like as graphic as the films. It was very they were so gory, and I loved it. But Alice and Dan made an appearance. It was very interesting.
I was going to go back to Amanda Kruger super quick, who just keeps hordes of horrific criminals locked up in a giant room. That's it. That's all I
Like, that looked like a silo, right?
I just, who was just yeah, right?
This sounds like a good idea.
Our supply of maniacs, and then she gets
Why was she even allowed in there?
So many questions about all of that.
Lack security.
But yeah, I just had to think, that was just percolating in my brain of just wow, at least things are better than that, hopefully. There aren't just people milling about in a giant...
One giant room.
Giant room of criminals, violent criminals. Anyway.
The one thing I also will say that on a rewatch that this movie does incredibly well that I think is a continuation of the first one is the way it plays with what's reality and what's dreams. From the opening scene where Kristen goes to, the Freddy house, and then she thinks that she wakes up and she goes in the bathroom, and it turns out that she's not woken up and the sink attacks her. That moment, or the times where there's a plenty of times where they fall asleep from hypnotism and then they think that it didn't work, but they're actually in the dream. Those moments of... It reminds me of the first one where it's it bleeds this sort of fantasy in with reality to the point that am I dreaming? Are we awake? Are we actually really safe right now? Or am I still stuck in the dream? I think this movie does incredibly well that none of the other sequels does.
Well, and it gives into that, it ramps up that paranoia and that anxiety of just you don't know where the fuck you are at any given moment. And I think the first one does that well with Nancy, but this one has a whole group of people who are experiencing this same scenario, and it's just horrific where none of you know where you are at any given moment, and if it's real and if it's not, and something how horrible is going to happen, and it just makes it all the more terrifying as it progresses. And everyone has had experience the multi-level nightmare, but I have them a lot, and so this also freaked me the fuck out of just that is a horrifying spot of oh yeah, this is totally I'm awake now, and you're actually not. It's just a horrible feeling in the first place, and then seeing it played with by Freddy Krueger is so fucked up, and thinking about someone who can delight in causing that kind of confusion is just downright evil.
I think that's why I like Freddy. It's terrible, but I do. He's a big ol' softy.
I mean, this is the one where he gets into the quips and stuff, right? And it becomes a little bit more comedic than, because he had a couple quips in the first one, but they were profane, this is God, that kind of stuff. Whereas this is a little bit more dark humor, dark comedy type of quips. But we kind of touched on it, but I think to finish this out, I want to focus on the tragedy of it all, that this is the movie in which Nancy and her father are murdered. And what a fuck you when her father dies and he appears and you think, oh, it's a ghost. Last moment saying goodbye, and it turns out that it's Freddy. And he stabs her. How horrible.
Oh.
That's still...
Freddy sucks.
That gets me every time, just because the first time I didn't know any better, but, now I'm just well, fuck. But it's done so well, and you've got Kristen then crying over her, saying she's gonna dream her a beautiful dream.
Oh.
I was like, oh my god! I was like, this is heartbreaking. I was happy though that it felt like, even though it really wasn't, that she got that resolution with her dad, but. That was cruel.
Well, and again, this is coming out, this is in an era and in horror franchises where you expect there to be a quasi happy ending, and the good girl isn't gonna get got, and good girl got, and it's fucked up. It's fucked up.
I love the Nightmare franchise, and I will say, as we've talked about this, I'm so basic, but honestly, I'm always going to go back to the original. That, even though this was my first experience to Freddy, there's just something about the very first one that I just thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah.
And it's, but yeah, this would be
So
my second.
what's your ranking of these films? Again, putting you right on that spot.
Yeah, I okay. It's gonna be 1, 3, 7,
Okay.
then 4. 7 and 4 can flip flop from time to time, and then after that, then I guess 5 because I still love Alice. 2 because I do love how it is basically queer, and Freddy's Dead is just a bad all around in my opinion. I'll still love it because it's Freddy, but I did not enjoy Freddy's Dead. I was just like, really?
What about you, Mary Beth?
Oh, you've done this like 600 times.
I know I did, but
Okay, so
I'm doing it again.
Okay. I'm just reminding myself of everything real quick because there's too many.
She has been watching it her entire life, like I have.
No, I'm terrible.
Like, I mean,
okay.
oh gosh.
So,
There's
okay.
just
1, 3,
Okay.
4,
Okay.
New Nightmare, 2, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Yes, that's my final answer.
I'm not mad at it.
What's yours, Terry?
1, 4, 3, 7, 6, 2, 5.
Okay.
I think 5 is just, it's boring. I'll be honest. I went to go see like a marathon of them. Like, oh geez, I don't even remember when it was. It was like 4 years ago, maybe. And so it was like literally up all 7 of the originals. Fuck the remake. And it was like an all day affair. And I'll tell you, by the time we got to 5, I was falling asleep. I'm like, this movie is so fucking boring. And as terrible as I do think 6 is, I don't think it's a very great movie. It wasn't boring, at least. It was silly. It was fun.
I'll give you that.
It was like a Looney Tunes cartoon brought to life. So for me, it was more fun than 5 was. Because 5 I just thought was a turd. It was just so boring. I was so bored in that movie. There's some gnarly moments in it, but it's boring.
They could have went hard on that kid who got, like, with the comic book death scene. Still
I
mad
know.
about that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm like,
It's the
you
most
guys went too
offensive
light
kill,
on that.
but it's like... yeah.
Mm-mm.
All right, so Yutaka, watching this now as an adult, does it still scar you? Is it a still scar for life moment? Did it bring you back to being a kid?
No.
Okay.
I just love it. I will say, it's something that I could just put on and just enjoy myself. Like, watching this, delighting in Freddy terrorizing all of them, even though, like, they're great characters. But I just, again, Freddy as just this individual is so charismatic that I delight in seeing him on screen. So
Hell yeah.
I can't say I'm scared of any Nightmare on Elm Street film anymore, sadly.
Fair. All right, so let's wrap this up and give Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors a rating out of 5. Terry, how many words just left my head? How many Welcome to Primetime bitches out of 5 do you give Dream Warriors?
Okay, so I think this movie is a lot of fun. I do love the themes that it explores. I love the characters. I do think that as a whole, the group of characters here are probably the most well-rounded of any of the teens in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. I think that they're very lovable. They're very likable. The effects in this movie, we briefly touched on it, from the snake, I think is still incredibly well done. I have a soft spot in my heart for stop motion, and so the stop motion aspects of the puppet and even the skeletons Yutaka at the end, I think are great. I think this movie has a lot of great practical effects. I think it was nice to see Nancy come back. It was nice to see her father, even though they did not have the happiest of endings. There's a lot going on here. My biggest problem, my biggest stopping point, even trying to watch it as an adult, is when it goes full camp in the end after establishing such emotional stakes. So, even that said, I do think this is...
That's a big
1.
sigh.
It's a 1. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's I don't know if I can give it 4 complete. I think it's like 3.75. Like, it's not a 3.5, but I just can't give it a 4. Welcome to Primetime Bitches for me. Maybe it is a 4. I don't know. Mary Beth, stop looking at me. Go. Stop preceding me. How many Welcome to Primetime Bitches for you, Mary Beth?
Well, I give it 4. I give this one 4. I mean, you said it all, but I think this movie is so mean and so good and does a really amazing job of expanding the emotional stakes of the movie. And kind of showing us the effects of Freddy spread across even more people, and not just one girl, but a group of teenagers plus Nancy, and it brings in the final girl, like the traumatized final girl aspect so well, and it's heartbreaking and sad and traumatizing, and I think it's just like an incredible entry into a series that I love, but also can be very silly, and I think this one really balances. It's like on the cusp of like the silliness of Freddy, and I think it balances that really well. And it's a damn good sad time. So Yutaka, you have the final word. How many?
Put that on the poster. I'm sorry, but put that on the fucking poster. A damn good sad time. Love
and
it.
This is out of how many? Out of 5?
Out of 5.
Oh, well, I don't want to be basic and say 5, because there are some things I would nitpick. But I will say, it's one that I know I've seen probably at least over 100 times. It's just something that, growing up terrified the hell out of me, but I still enjoyed it. As an adult, it has just this high rewatch factor, because as you said, I think the characters, this is just a great cast. And you really just get to also see, it was, as an adult, I will also say it was just so great seeing that Nancy come back and be, a little bit more hardened. But then you have, as you said, Kristen, badass. There's just so much. Oh, God, this brings me back to my childhood, which is terrible, because it's more of that I love the fact that I'm thinking about all the films that I've seen that just take me back. And this is so... I will give this one, and also, again, Philip's death. That is so cruel, but so good.
Yeah.
I would say a 4.5, because I could easily put this on or if it were to ever to come on TV at any point in time, if I just, turned on maybe halfway through, I'd sit and finish I love this film. So it's not a perfect, but it's damn near close for me.
There you go.
Oh, I could tell you several films, but maybe not horror though. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Where can our listeners find you? And what do you have coming up you can plug?
Well, they could find us at the Horror Hour TV. That's all of our handles on Twitter and Instagram and on YouTube. We're just messy on YouTube, so just go check that out if you want to have a good time. Yeah. But honestly, we've got a few interviews coming up. We'll be chatting with Duncan Birmingham for Who Invited Them. And then we do have Sylvia Kaminer for Follow Her. And then it's terrible. I've got a backlog of interviews that we have to actually post. But we've also, what I'm not used to is this whole thing called embargo. So I have to hold off on holding all of this. And I think we do have one with Andrew Siemens from Resurrection. So, cool. Yeah. That's what we have, and we have some in the works for maybe some future Shudder films as well.
And your personal Twitter account?
Oh. Okay, so that is, it looks like Osaka, which is funny, because it's almost so close to Osaka, but really it's actually a Japanese anime backwards. So, Yu Yu Hakusho. So I was like, and as I say this now, I'm thinking, nobody's ever going to have that handle. I will say, at least on most of mine, that's been my handle, and I've never had to add like an underscore or a number, so I'm very happy about that. So don't fuck that up, people.
Yeah, people.
But yeah, that's where they can find me and our podcast, and We're just, a silly group of people.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm McGailey Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Somebody please think of the children! Somebody please think of the children! Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is the briefing room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.